Hi, welcome, Jean, to the FSA podcast. You are one of our new lecturers that we've recruited this year as part of our artificial intelligence program. I've had the opportunity to sit through one of your trainings on governance and ethics when it comes to AI, but our audience today haven't had necessarily the chance. So can you please give us a little bit of an introduction of who you are, how are you involved in AI, and then we can have a bit of a discussion on that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. And I also enjoyed the session that already gave to the members of the FSA and the MFSA. So I'm my name is Jean, Father Jean. I'm a Catholic priest here in Malta. And my main background is in philosophy, right? So that was kind of the main area of study that I kind of went into. A few years ago, I was up in Scotland. At the time, the whole reality of AI was, slowly raising its head in a wider and more kind of pervasive way around the world. And given kind of the intersection of my study between ethics, philosophy, philosophy of mind and language, so kind of the nature of speech, when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, so a bit more theoretical there, I found myself more and more applying the philosophical knowledge I had and kind of skills onto the novel questions that are arising in AI, both on the more abstract. So does ChatGPT think, for example, right? These maybe more, is it a he or a she or a it or what is it? How do we interact, right? Kind of we're seeing this more and more. We interact in a more human way with these tools. Is that good, bad? How do we make sense of that? Those are a bit more theoretical up there, maybe more armchair style philosophy, right? But then at the same time, I also found myself dragged into, for better or for worse, the more maybe rubber hits the road issues, right? The ethics issues. So education. Teachers are realizing this is becoming a problem. What do we do? Is it good? Is it bad? We're talking about maybe issues pertaining to social media, and we're seeing the effects not just on the young, but we're seeing the effects of social media on, every strata of society when it comes to misinformation, elections. We had the election here, right? So, but we look at elections all around the world, and we see the impact that social media has. So these are the real ethical questions where AI is bringing about change now, not in the future when AGI, will it happen or not happen, which are also interesting and very important. But there's at least mentally, I look at these as those questions in the future, near future, but these questions which we're facing now. So I slowly found myself kind of working more and more within this field. I do an element of research in academia, either helping out with teams that are predominantly AI, doing AI projects, and I'm kind of the ethics component to that team. So I work on a couple of projects here in Malta, the University of Malta. But I'm also kind of doing then advocating in terms of policy, I suppose, right? Both in an informal way on behalf of the Archdiocese of Malta. So I'm the diocesan coordinator for AI. So on behalf of the Archdiocese, we've launched the first, I think the first in the world, I'm not really sure, but I think the first in the world, kind of position paper of the Archdiocese on the use of AI within the national context of Malta. That was launched in January. I also kind of contribute some help towards the Holy See, the Vatican, both in terms of coordinating a group of researchers on AI, European researchers on AI. So there are reflections. There are more on what we call Catholic social teaching. So basically, the intersection of politics, AI, and society. So how do we look at issues of subsidiarity and solidarity, or democracy and participation within the novel reality of AI? And I represent the Holy See at the Council of Europe, once again on matters pertaining to AI. The kind of a mix of maybe research and also maybe more applied context.
You don't seem very busy at all. Okay, well, I'll just jump in. One of my first questions is, artificial intelligence is here to stay, right? And we can speak about the ethics and the governance behind artificial intelligence, but none of it really matters if the people are not actually educated on what artificial intelligence it is. And it's very much two-folded, right? You have the institutional side of things where your workforce needs to be educated on the systems that they're using and how they should be ethically using them. But then you also have the general public who are the consumers of said products. And if consumers are not really educated on the impact of the services that they're using is having through the utilization of AI, we're really kind of not in a good place. It creates panic, it creates fear, it creates misunderstanding, and it's also creating a sense of people not understanding their rights, for example. So what are your views in terms of the importance of literacy and education in the age of artificial intelligence?
The short answer would be super important, but we can expand on that, right?
Yes.
So I think maybe the follow-up would be why. And I think you already hinted at some of my parts of what my answer will say. A lack of education, or rather, let's start from a different point of view. It all boils down to trust.
Yeah.
And this is maybe something I will also repeat it quite a bit during the training session. It all boils down to trust. Everything we do in society is premised on trust. I trust you to provide me a service. You trust me to pay you for that service, right? I trust governmental bodies to do the work and to function, and institutions to function. I trust my neighbor to, behave well, and if he doesn't, I trust the police to do something about it, right? Now, because of the nature of the AI technologies that are being rolled out, we are seeing, for better or for worse, kind of an increase in mistrust, in distrust in these tools, right? Part of it brought about because people might have used these tools in an incorrect way.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, deepfakes would be the best example here, right? So someone is using technology for bad ends, for bad means, right? For scamming and anything else in between, right? That is one case. We also have, unfortunately, a growing mistrust of these big AI companies.
Yes.
So social media would be a fantastic example, right? The promise of connectivity and world fraternity. And look at us now.
An algorithm that knows you well.
Exactly, right? I was reading an article today about new products coming out by OpenAI, and they said they want this agent to be delightfully personal, and I thought that sounds very creepy already. So we have this mistrust, right? So the more mistrust we have in society, the less society functions. Yeah. This is the main reason why we need this literacy. We need it, first of all, people to understand what's going on. How is the system functioning? So I can trust it at least adequately enough. How are people using these systems? So if I go to a bank, if I go to the government for a service, if I go to a private company to buy something, a product, and they're using AI, I need to feel that I can trust them with, for example, my data, to trust them that they're using the information well. So this literacy is important, as you mentioned, not on the level of just of companies, but also on the level of the wider public, that we can kind of preserve and build up, because we've lost a bit of it, this trust in society.
I think it all boils down to transparency, as you're saying. I think that both the conglomerates that are owning these large LLMs, the regulators like the FSA, and also the industries providing said services need to be transparent in how they're utilizing said services to serve the general public in order for that trust to be built in. On that wagon, I'll jump in a few questions ahead. AI has existed as a technology for a very long time. It's something that you touched upon even during the training session. I've worked with AI since 2017. However, the wider momentum we're seeing right now of LLMs, it started growing in 2022, let's say. So some are seeing that kind of as a beginning of a new industrial revolution, and with every industrial revolution there's new opportunities, there's new jobs, but there's also not the pitfalls of an industrial revolution. Some may say that certain industries and certain jobs are becoming redundant at nature. We can see that people are starting to have a lot of conversations. They're becoming fearful of how AI is going to impact their day-to-day life. And many are calling for further regulation of AI. A recent example I actually read of, I think, a good approach taken by a government was a Chinese court that made it illegal for companies to fire their employees to fully replace them with AI or to cut costs. So what are your views when it comes to the concerns and the fears that people are experiencing? And do you think that the lack of or the too much information of AI has a role to play in those fears? It's a bit of a loaded question.
Yeah, and there are loaded questions, right? There are 4 or 5 there.
4 or 5 questions.
Fantastic. So let's try and break it down. Then tell me if I left anything out.
It's okay.
So first of all, what we're passing through now is like the Industrial Revolution, but also not like the Industrial Revolution, right? So the rate of change at the moment is much quicker.
Yes.
For example, right? The quality of change, right? The paradigmatic shift we're experiencing now, I would argue, and many kind of I think would agree, is also of a larger shift than what we saw in the Industrial Revolution. The quality or sectors of jobs or industries that are being affected is also different. And therefore, this brings about a greater level of disruption than what we saw in the Industrial Revolution. Now, we've passed through that. So one would hope we've learned a few lessons, right?
We've passed through it a couple of times, one may say.
As well. So first of all, yes, there's going to be disruption, there's going to be change. I think it would be, burying our heads in the sand if we were to say that no jobs will be lost, right? But I think there are a few things we should say here. One, to maybe soften the blow, but also to remain eyes wide open, I suppose, right? On one level, as jobs will cease to exist, other jobs will also be created. So that's one thing we should keep in mind. So that's a pro. A con, or a greater difficulty, is with the kind of industrial revolution moving towards from an agrarian economy to more of an industrialized kind of factory productivity economy, manufacturing economy. In a sense, individuals with the same level of skill could pivot into kind of these new professions, right? Kind of the skills that you had before in agriculture-related jobs, right? One could easily be kind of reskilled. Kind of it didn't require a massive jump, right? Whereas now, the quality of jobs that we seem to think, or the indication is that might be affected, are quite high-skilled professions, right? So, and the new jobs that will be created, we would imagine, right, and already there's some evidence to indicate this, are also going to be high-skilled. But this would require a greater effort to reskill, to pivot into what the new jobs would look like, right? So, in a sense, this means that we need to take greater care. So if we know that change is coming, we're feeling change, right?
Yes,
this change is going to be bigger than we've ever imagined, right? And the challenges we're going to face are going to be larger. This means we should be a bit more proactive, right? So, for example, we're seeing companies, for example, or rather, I should say, the promise is that AI integrated within companies will unlock greater productivity, greater profit, right? So I think there should be, and I say this from an ethical point of view, of course, there should be some sense of responsibility either towards the rest of the employees, right? That gain should be kind of, in a sense, that benefit should be shared to some degree or other. Right now, how sharing is understood might be, a contentious point. But anyway, on a societal level, right? Maybe companies that one suggestion that we intimate, we don't really propose, or would be, and something that's been in the news here or there, is that companies making a substantial profit gains as a result of AI might have maybe different tax requirements. For example, right? In a sense, we want to ensure that what happened in the Industrial Revolution doesn't happen, and there's a greater risk, which is people are left behind. Right? People become unemployable. Right? So coupled with this, so that's maybe more of an institutional condition or safeguard. Coupled with this, I think there has to be more concrete, coherent, and cohesive, right? Training and upskilling and reskilling programs. The state has a responsibility. But I would venture to say that even private entities have a responsibility, right? So, for example, I think a responsible CEO will look to 5 years in the future, right? 10 years, I think, is a bit too much at the moment, right? But 2 to 5 years in the future, and try to think, how will my workforce change? Right? Will I need more people in this sector of the company? Will I need less people here? So should I already start maybe reskilling people in this sector in order to be redeployed in a different sector of the company, right? So that's a way that we can also all be responsible in this kind of collective effort through the wave of change that we are already experiencing. So there are different, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. It's, people brandishing about the magic wand of UBI. I think it's a bit of again, not an economist, but not entirely sure that that is a solution. Different people have to kind of ensure that what we're already seeing doesn't carry on. And what I'm referring to is we're seeing a greater increase of power, consolidation of power within a handful of entities and individuals, both within the field of AI as a sector by itself, but also that people who maybe deploy AI are not kind of excessively advantaged
Yeah.
over others, to the point that this would lead to kind of people being left behind or falling through the cracks of society.
Yeah.
This would have further ramifications in society as well, beyond the economic and the financial.
Yes, yes. But the monopolization of certain services within a few large corporations is something that we have seen even in the past with, I mean, Google is an example, Facebook or Meta, however they refer to it today, that's example. So it is a little bit concerning that there's such a consolidation of ownership of the largely popular LLMs within very few institutions. I think that's what maybe potentially is also driving a bit of more fear and distrust. Do you think that maybe media plays a role in the perception of the general public? Because the more I go online, and I do spend a lot of time on TikTok, I must admit, I am hooked on the algorithm of TikTok. But the more I go on TikTok, the more I go on Instagram, which are also algorithms ran by AI, mind you.
Exactly.
If I'm seeing traditional media outlets, so BBC, CNN, the way that they're portraying the shift towards AI, it feels almost like the end of the world at times. It seems like we're speaking about, conflicts in the Middle East. That's how it feels to me. Then you have the other extremes where you have quite younger generations that are teaching you and your grandfather how to use artificial intelligence to cheat on your exams or write your emails, Then you have the middle ground of individuals who are concerned on the environmental impact that artificial intelligence has and will have long term. So what do you think is the overall role that the media that we consume, both traditional and non-traditional, has on the perception and trust that we're putting into our governments and into these organizations that own the LLMs?
This is a massive problem. So for a number of reasons. First of all, we're seeing in Malta, including Malta, a shift away from traditional media and towards, social media, platforms, stuff like that. In fact, I think the recent last few years studies of the state of the nation here in Malta kind of showed that the overwhelming majority of people consume their news through social media platforms.
Yeah.
So this is like 1,000 red flags here, right? Because as you very well mentioned, this is something that we do, for example, in a project we run with MDIA for literacy sessions with the elderly.
Yeah.
We kind of emphasize, look, not everything you see on Facebook is true.
Yes.
Right? Or TikTok or Instagram, right?
Yes.
Instagram is my drug of choice. So this is a problem. Right? Because we're consuming our media there. The algorithms are giving us what keeps us engaged.
Yes.
Now, we know, empirically speaking, that we will engage more with content that is controversial, that is clickbaity, that we tend to disagree with or afraid of.
Yes.
Right? So, of course, if you think, content that says AI is going to kill us all, will drive up clicks, engagement and likes and all of that. So, that is one part of the spectrum, the extreme doomer, right? And then the other end is these AI companies telling us we will live in a utopia.
Yes.
And
I've
then thinking, you look at these people and then you also read about their lifestyle and think, how more detached from reality can you be? Right? So this is at times a bit of a vicious cycle, right?
Yep.
So kind of the hype fuels more doomerism and distrust.
Yes.
Distrust kind of, I walk into a room and immediately I realize people put me into a box. Is he a doomer or is he a techno-optimist, right?
Yes.
Because in reality, we have to be somewhere in the middle. I think part of this problem that, bit of the two extremes is also, I think, nobody, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here, I think nobody really knows what the true gains of these tools are.
Yeah.
Right? So I think at times we are overshooting or undershooting.
Yeah.
And I think it's only time that will tell where maybe this is not a good application of AI. Yeah. This is a great application of AI. So this past month, I've been reading about companies who initially gave their teams, their employees, free rein to deploy agents and AI tools across the board.
Yeah.
Now, when they're faced with the bills for all the token usage of the
Yes, I read
and they're not
those.
seeing the commensurate productivity gains.
Yes.
They're thinking maybe keeping, having like normal people employed and doing the work instead of offloading everything to AI
Yeah.
might not, might be a good idea. So I think there's a bit of a pendulum thing until
Yeah.
we find balance here. But unfortunately, I think it is going to be difficult for that balance to be found.
Yeah.
Because you still have those AI companies, proclaiming the evangelization of the hype.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's
because
what I was
obviously
going to say.
they have their interest to do
Yes,
that.
yes.
And which you still see kind of the doomerism,
Yeah.
part of which I'll be honest again. So I think a good number of the complaints from the doomer camp are very valid. At times, I think they are maybe too exaggerated. So environmental concerns, very valid.
Very valid, I think, yeah.
Especially in communities, rural and local communities where, for example, their water supply has been
Impacted.
heavily impacted. Issues related to mining of resources,
Yeah.
right? Issues pertaining to education and a greater increase in the lack of social interaction in younger generations.
Yeah.
These are valid things. Right, the step that AI will kill us all is maybe a bit of a larger step, but the real challenges we're facing now, we are already facing and need to address.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say, is that I think and you mentioned it during your session, and I very strongly agree with that. I think that AI is exaggerating a lot of issues that were already existing prior to that, and there's very few novel issues that are coming out from AI. I do think, however, that generationally, I think both generations, the younger generation and the more experienced generations, are impacted in very different ways at the workplace, but also in their personal day-to-day life. We can see that younger generations usually are more prone to adapting innovative technologies quite quickly, whether that's online banking, crypto investments, but as good as it is that they are so advanced and they're quickly picking up those skills and they're quickly developing, we're seeing very big pitfalls with younger generations. For example, they're not very good at saving. Okay, they think that paying with your Revolut card all the time is like online money. They don't exist, girl math.
You can say that, I can't say that, yeah.
Well, older generations, they're very stuck in their ways, traditional banking and traditional investments. And there is that type of resistance at times to adapt to the new technological advancements that are coming both to the workplace and the day-to-day life, which is preventing them to fully participate in society. Which is quite concerning, at least for me, the way that I see it, because there is both a generational and a digital divide that is becoming to exist. And a very big perpetuator, I think, of that are institutions. We're quite mixed at the MFSA, to be quite frank. We are now, there's a lot of Gen Zs now. I have Gen Zs in my office. I'm, trying to get along with all the GIFs and all the whatever this is,
6, 7, all of that.
Exactly. And I'm just trying to understand what's happening a lot of the times. But I think that since at the workplace we're becoming kind of equalized, the two generations, we're seeing the younger generations growing quickly in their roles, picking up quickly new tasks, being capable to be more productive. So they're overcoming kind of the task paralysis quite quicker, while the older generations are really struggling with that because they're adopting technologies slower. In institutions, what I'm seeing from some of the empirical research is that they quickly adopt new technologies, AI being one of them, but 70% of their CEOs do not consider investing in training or education within their institution before the adoption happened and for a long period after the adoption happened. So what do you think is the impact that the generations are experiencing, both from a beneficial perspective for both generations, but also what they should be on the lookout if you are a Gen Z or a boomer, at the workplace?
Well, and there's us in between, right?
There's us in between, the millennials, exactly.
So I think maybe, first of all, I'll start by saying I think it's I think maybe there are some other nuances here. So, for example, it's interesting you kind of picked on the whole thing that when we pay with plastic money, we don't have a concept of money.
Not at all.
Now I can kind of jump into the deep end here of philosophy and say kind of when we are physical beings in the sense that we need to see. right? We need to. So when I see a library, I see all that knowledge. The same knowledge technically is in my phone.
Yeah.
But there's something about seeing that knowledge, in books, in printed text.
You should sell that to my parents because they keep telling me not to buy books and to get a Kindle.
You need to buy books. I love
I know,
buying books.
but they told me I have far too many books and I need to stop buying books.
Buy more books. Never a waste of money. So that's one thing. Equally with money, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean, if I see cash in my hand, cash is king. If I see cash in my hand, I kind of have a sense of how rich or not rich I am, as opposed to a card, right? So there's an argument here, maybe, which is maybe for another time.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's also maybe different qualities in different generations as well. So, for example, generally, I think older generations tend to be a bit more resilient, at least, or persevering, let us say, in different contexts. But to the actual question that you said, so first of all, I think. If there's anyone here thinking, listening to us, thinking that their company hasn't yet adopted AI, this is a lie.
It's a lie, yeah.
This is a lie. Maybe they haven't yet officially adopted AI.
Or announced.
They haven't kind of sanctioned the use of particular AI tools.
Yeah.
But I would venture to say a lot, I won't say every, but a lot of employees across any organization, in Malta at least, right? So we were talking about this before, right? I think we rank at number 3 in Europe for AI use on the workplace.
Yeah.
So if we rank the 3rd in Europe, that should say something, right? So I think this betrays that there is a mismatch between maybe what higher level management, of the organization kind of think, know, assume, or are doing about AI, and what is actually happening on the ground.
Exactly.
And this mismatch can lead to problems.
Yes.
Right. So either employees who are not educated enough on kind of the impact of the use of data or which tools, how they function, and therefore there might be problems with data, problems with maybe certain outputs or outcomes or decisions made by the company, legal ramifications. Let's not get into that, right? Because that's another kind of worms.
Yeah.
So the improper use can lead to more problems than solutions.
Exactly.
Right. So definitely education here should be number 1 on the agenda.
Yeah.
Education of, if it's a CEO or the kind of upper senior management of, what is actually happening, what is this technology, what are the benefits? Because there are benefits. There are
quite a few benefits
for
employees.
Few. Fantastic. And I walk into a room, especially if they think I'm a bit of a doomer, I begin by saying, look, I use these tools. In fact, I don't use them enough. I'm always on the lookout for new, ways that I can, make my life easier. And use
the way
tools.
They're integrated into third-party products that we're using.
As well.
It's amazing.
So the benefits are there, but also the benefits can only be reaped if we kind of deploy these tools properly.
Yeah.
Meaning with the necessary safeguards, with the right training, with the necessary safeguards, for example, in terms of cybersecurity, right?
Yes.
Necessary safeguards in terms of maybe other legal liabilities, necessary safeguards in terms of the preservation of trust, as we said, right?
Yes.
Because your company might be using all of the AI properly, but if your clients don't trust you using these tools, it's all for nothing, right?
Yeah.
So safeguards, I would understand more than just legal compliance. In fact, as I repeated again and again and again ad nauseam during the training session, an approach which only seeks to have a bare minimum legal compliance is insufficient and is bound to fail.
Yes.
Is bound to fail. For a number of reasons. So when I say safeguards, kind of this is where the ethics comes into play with the adequate risk assessment of, again, the sector, what the risks are, that's why you do an assessment, right?
Yeah.
So the benefits are there, but only if we introduce properly, prudently, and in an educated way.
Yeah.
So different people need to be educated differently, meaning what is your role in the company, right?
Yes.
What's the sector the company is in?
Yeah.
And then, how do we ensure that there's a kind of proper protocols in place?
Yeah.
Again, depending on what the thing you're doing is, in order to ensure that the benefits are there with as minimum a risk as possible.
Yeah. I think that one thing that I have been observing, because I do sit, as I've told you earlier, on the AI working group at the MFSA, what I am concerned about is that maybe institutions are not always aware that the critical third-party providers that they're using within their institutions, it could be a transaction monitoring tool that they're using. That's not a system that they own themselves. It's a third party. but most likely they are already utilizing AI to enhance that system. That within itself is an adoption of AI within the company. So there is a level of adoption that is happening behind the scenes. Maybe senior management is not aware. So an educated workforce is a prepared workforce. So you need to start early. You need to be ahead of the curve at least. And I'm speaking biasly because obviously I run training at the MFSA. You need to start early in order for your employees to be your frontliners. And you need to be very conscious of the fact that, yes, you will have a large section of your organization which will prepare itself kind of naturally for AI or crypto or fintech, whatever it is. But there will be a section of your company that will need a bit more push. And you can't leave that in the back burner until, a rainy day comes.
Yeah, and I think we're hitting on a point which we haven't mentioned so far, which is part of it is this trust point, right?
Yeah.
The other is, look, it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
Ethically speaking. But also, if I can appeal to maybe more, I say selfish, but maybe not the right word, because maybe that's too morally loaded. But a company that looks after its workforce and educates it appropriately is a company that is more resilient.
Yes.
So again, there's mixed data. We're not entirely sure because this is all projections, but it seems to be the case that we're going to have a bit of a shortage, at least in the short term, of adequately trained individuals for kind of these new professions that are kind of being created, which we don't really know exactly what they are, 100%, right?
Ambiguity.
So
yes.
Exactly. So in a sense, if let us imagine the most reckless picture imaginable, right? A CEO who thinks, look, I couldn't care less. Revenue, profit, that's my number one baseline. So if I can, offload all of my employees and just use AI, it'd be great. All right. So, you're going to hit a wall at some point or other because these tools aren't as reliable, and it's not a question of time. There's certain maybe foundational elements that can't be really remedied. And then you realize you need to employ people again, right? Or maybe you need to employ people in a different sector of the company, a new sector possibly, right? You're going to struggle, right? Because at the moment, because everyone's going to want those sort of workers with those sort of skills, right? Who are going to be very much in short demand, right? So whereas if this training happens in-house, or if this, kind of these education opportunities are again encouraged by organizational elements of the company to the wider workforce, this will make that company even more resilient in the changes that are to come. So it helps individuals in their own resilience on the job market, but I would venture to say it helps the companies themselves in their own resilience in the changes that we're seeing.
Absolutely. I think that we've seen this similar situation happen when everything was blockchain and everything was on the blockchain, and then we had NFTs and we had everything was crypto. Every company was issuing cryptocurrencies. And my only fear is that with time, we're not really learning our lesson, unfortunately. Maybe a bit more than before, but I don't think that we are there yet, where when a new wave of technological advancements comes, we think employees first as business owners. I think that's very important, that if there's one thing I can preach from my side is don't wait for the next big thing to hit you before you train your employees into it or you make them aware. Don't wait for quantum computing or quantum mechanics to be number one fear of the world and how are we going to protect our companies from that. Start trying to get your employees to be interested, attend training, organize it for them, support them, so you as a company are ahead and the employees are ahead with you.
Absolutely. I mean, and you mentioned quantum, for example. So this week, as I was mentioning to you, I was on this panel for the European Court of Auditors, and it was actually on AI, quantum, and cybersecurity. So, and everyone on the table is like, we're getting the grip of AI just about, and nobody really knows a lot or enough about quantum, right? I mean, and someone in the audience asked a question, when will we be ready? Like, the question was, what does being ready look like? How do we know that we have achieved that destination? And I think, in a sense, I could be a bit zen here and say, it's about the journey, not the destination.
It's about the journey.
But in a sense, I think the way we should look at this is kind of not the best time at the moment to use kind of war imagery, but I think being on this constantly ready state of alert is what we should understand by being ready, right? So are we constantly updating? Are we kind of making sure that we're being proactive in what's going on? So I think if we just say we're ready as we've ticked a number of check boxes. We do that once a year, and occasionally we send someone. We have enough people in legal, we have enough people in risk, we have, and we're ready. No, right? So, and we can wait for next year's assessment or revision,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
That is not being ready. So I think being ready really has to be constantly making sure we are on the ball. And education is one thing, precisely because once we're educated enough, then we can face kind of the different challenges.
Yeah.
Or well, again, we're never educated enough.
Yeah.
But once we kind of carry on this footing of continual education, we kind of then we're in a more agile position to confront the novelties and the novel challenges and disruptions that will come our way.
And I think it's very important that people understand that educating your workforce empowers the workforce to keep the company ahead for you as a leader, because you give them the freedom to come up with new ideas, new, more efficient ways to implement this technology, whatever it is, blockchain, artificial intelligence, quantum, cyber, in a more effective way, because they're the people who are on the ground, right? So empowering your employees through education, I think it's very vital at this stage. I have one last question for you, okay? And we're going to end it on this. Literacy, as we've spoken a lot on it today, plays a very big role in the ethical use of artificial intelligence. Where do you think the intersection is of ethics and literacy when it comes to this particular technology?
I think literacy, or rather, I'm trying to find like a catchy way of saying this. In doing literacy is ethics and practice. Does that work?
That was a very good one.
Literacy
what do the Gen
ethics.
Zs do?
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm thinking of the language. My sister kind of throws a few of these words to me. But anyway, so what do I need to say by this? People think ethics is the whole, don't do this, this is bad, this is bad, right? That's a very restrictive, reductive, bad way of looking at ethics, right?
Yeah.
That's one problem we have with our perception of ethics. We also have a problem with our perception of literacy.
Yeah.
Because people think literacy is just, how do I use ChatGPT? How do I prompt better?
Yeah.
Fine, that can be literacy, but that is like the tip of the iceberg of literacy, right? So if we're talking about ethics, which is doing things properly, using things as they should be used and not as they shouldn't be used in order to ultimately create more good than bad, literacy is understanding what the tool does, how does it work, and therefore how should I use it, right? Or when should I or shouldn't I use it, right? So in a sense, the ethical principles that we go on and on and on about should be distilled into any kind of literacy training, right? So in a sense, this was something I that was maybe subconsciously in my mind as I was preparing the training session for the FSA, right, for MFSA, which was precisely this. So we tried to cover, what does the tool do? How do they function, right? And I kind of went at length to kind of say, look, this is more of a conceptual understanding than the technical, right? It doesn't really matter that we know, it's not vital that everyone knows what deep neural networks are and reinforced learning by human feedback, and all that. But we need to know that, look, ultimately these are systems that function on probability, right?
Yeah.
So this means that there are some risks. This means that they're great at some things, not great at other things. That's literacy. This means, therefore, that I could use them in these applications, but not in these. These are the risks, and this is what I should look out for. Yeah. Right? So that's literacy, basically. So literacy and ethics really overlap a lot more than maybe people might think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you.
And I look forward to having another one soon.